Hello everyone, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. There was a huge confusion with the aspirants and also in the entire national discourse about the nationalization of a very important and the biggest bank in India, that is SBI, okay, State Bank of India. So after the merger of all the state bank into the State Bank of India, like State Bank of Mysore, State Bank of Hyderabad, State Bank of Travancore into SBI, that is State Bank of India, SBI emerged as the largest bank in India and one of the most important banks in the top 100 banks. If you look at the top 100 banks of the entire world, we will find two banks from India. One is SBI and the second one is recently, that is HDFC. So in today's video, we'll look at what is bank nationalization, okay, when were the banks nationalized, and why were the banks nationalized. Okay, finally we will also look at why doesn't the RBI classify SBI under its nationalized banks. Correct. So this is something for today's discussion. First question to be answered: what is bank nationalization? If you look at the term nationalization, one thing that we can understand is that the control is taken over by the government. So the process in which the banks in India, okay, were taken over by the government and government became the majority stakeholder, majority shareholder in all the banks. So this process is called as bank nationalization. Clear? So in the year 1969, okay, in the year 1969, 14 banks in India, 14 banks in India were nationalized, and in the year 1969, the Prime Minister was Indira Gandhi. So in the year 1969, 14 banks were nationalized, and this process is called as nationalization of banks, which means before 1969 we are talking about, that is from 1947 to 1969. So this around 22-year time period, the banks were majority, the major banks were owned by the private companies. Okay, the private individuals owned these banks. So in the year 1969, the Prime Minister came out with the recommendation, came out with the proposal and nationalized all these banks. Okay, so this process is called as bank nationalization. Second question to be answered: when were the nationalization of banks done? Okay, when were they actually nationalized? We have seen the first set of nationalization happened in the year 1969. Okay, so 14 banks were nationalized in the year 1969. Okay, and then what happened? 6 banks again were nationalized in the year 1980. 6 banks were nationalized in the year 1980. 1980 is the third term for the Indira Gandhi. 1965, 66 to 1969 will be the first term. 70 to 77. Actually, it should be 75. 1975 to 1977, we had the emergency. So that is the Indira Gandhi second term of the Srimati Indira Gandhi. Third term will be in the year 1980 to 1984 before she got assassinated. So this first year of her election, okay, 1980 there was an election, general election. From 1980 to 1984, Indira Gandhi is the Prime Minister for the third time. So then the 6 banks were nationalized. Clear? So one is in the year 1969, second in the year 1980. Next question to be answered, and a very important question to be answered: why were the banks nationalized? Okay, what is the reason for the Prime Minister to come out with such a radical move in the year 1969? Okay, I'll just give you the thread of events, you will be able to understand this. 1962 is the Indochina War, where India gets humiliating defeat against China. Okay, humiliating defeat against China, and with this, Pakistan gets an inspiration, thinking that the Indian defense forces are not equipped, Indian defense forces are not ready for the battle. Because of this, 1965, Pakistan attacks India and we have the Indo-Pak War. Okay, 1962, Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister. 1965, we have Lal Bahadur Shastri as the Prime Minister. So after this win in the 1965 war, Lal Bahadur Shastri goes out to Tashkent to sign an agreement, and that is called Tashkent Agreement. And the next day after signing the agreement, Lal Bahadur Shastri is dead. So in the year 1965, one thing that the India did, one strategy that the India followed was that India attacked Pakistan in the Rajasthan front, that is called a second war front. India opened the second war front. Because India opened the second war front, India was called as the initial aggressor. India was called as the initial aggressor, and in the same year, USA abandoned a program called as PL 480 through which USA was exporting wheat to us. Okay, now you might have a question. If India has attacked Pakistan in the year 1965, that's a strategy that we followed to win the war. Why should USA abandon PL 480? Just remember, from 1945 onwards to 1991, the entire world was going through a phenomena called as Cold War. The entire world was split between two world powers, that is, one is USA, second is USSR. So in this scenario, Pakistan, which became independent in the year 1947, aligned itself with USA. Outrightly Pakistan agreed that it will be with USA and it will not follow something called as non-alignment movement. This was the policy followed by India. Okay, non-alignment movement, which means we will not align ourselves with any of the countries, that is USA or USSR. We will remain independent. So Pakistan aligned itself with USA. India followed non-alignment movement. Because of this, okay, which means my friend's enemy is my enemy. Okay, following this, USA was unhappy when India attacked Pakistan in the Rajasthan front, that is the second war front. Because of this, USA abandoned the PL 480 program through which USA was exporting wheat to us. So this made very much problematic for us. This was very much problematic for us for our food security. So this caused a phenomena of food insecurity in India. So this happened in the year 1956. 66. Happened in the year 1966. Correct? Following this, by 1969, there was a huge demand for India to become self-sufficient with respect to the food products. That is Atmanirbhar with respect to the food products. For this to happen, banks had to go out and start lending to farmers. Giving credit to farmers. But banks were very much concentrated in the urban areas because actually at the end of the day, banks also work for the profit motive. And banks get more profit with respect to in the urban areas than in the rural areas. Because in the rural areas, the banking penetration was not good, the money flow was not good. Because of that, the banks were very much reluctant to get or establish their branches in the rural areas. Because of this, the bank penetration was very, very bad. And the banks are not happy lending it to the farmers because they don't know. The chances of a farmer defaulting the loan is actually high when you compare it with the merchant. Okay, the banks were very much reluctant to lending loans to the farmers. Because of this reason, in the year 1969, the Prime Minister came out with the notification and said, all the banks will be nationalized, which means government is taking over the control of all the banks. If government takes over the control of all the banks, then if the government orders to set up a branch in a rural area, then the bank should establish their branches. So because of this, the credit penetration increased. The farmers started getting more loans from the banks at a very cheap interest rate, and they invested this money on the agricultural produce. They got good produce, and because of this entire phenomena that happened, India saw something called as Green Revolution. Okay, Green Revolution. Clear? This is the reason why the banks were nationalized in the year 1969. Okay, so I hope you have understood this. Finally, what is a special case with respect to SBI? Okay, why don't RBI classifies SBI under its nationalized banks? See, the story goes around 1920s and 1921 we're talking about. During the British time, 1920s and 21, British had three important banks. That is in the three important provinces. One at Bombay, another one at Chennai, that is Madras, and one more in Kolkata. These three regional banks in the British presidencies were merged together by 1924 and 1925, and this was called as Imperial Bank of India. Okay, so this happening in the year 1924 and 1925. These three banks were merged and they were called as Imperial Bank of India. And you remember that in the year 1929, after the Great Depression, a Hilton Young Commission is appointed by the British government and Hilton Young Commission gives out the recommendation for the establishment of the RBI in the year 1934. So RBI Act comes in the year 1935. There is an RBI by 1935. There is also an Imperial Bank of India which was established in the year 1924. Okay, so 1948 and 49 we are talking about. The ownership of the RBI by 1948 was completely transferred to the Indian government. Correct? And 1949 we also have the Banking Regulation Act, because of which all the banks in India comes under the control of RBI. Clear? So still the Imperial Bank of India is still present. In the year 1955, the SBI Act comes over and the Imperial Bank of India becomes the State Bank of India. Clear? So which means in the year 1949, when the Banking Regulation Act was passed, when all the banks came under the control of the RBI, Imperial Bank of India was a separate entity. Clear? So because of this reason, and this continued till 2008. So in the year 2007 and 2008, the majority shareholder in the Imperial Bank of India, that is RBI, transferred its ownership of about 60%, which was owned by the RBI, transferred the ownership to the government. This is the reason why, though SBI is a majority shareholder, or the government is a majority shareholder in the SBI, when the RBI lists its nationalized banks, okay, the RBI will not list SBI. RBI will only list those banks that it acquired under the Banking Nationalisation Act. Okay, so this is the reason why, though SBI is a public sector bank, RBI doesn't recognize it and RBI doesn't classify it under the list of the other nationalized banks. Okay, that's it for the day. If you have liked the video, please hit the like button. Also consider subscribing to the Legacy IAS Academy YouTube channel. Have a nice day. Thank you.